Dave. Welcome to the Landscape Photography World. How are you going?
I'm going well, thanks, Grant. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Pleased you're on the show. We've met once or twice and had a bit of a shoot. Why don't you tell people who you are and why you are?
No worries. Name's David Fairs. I'm creative of many different mediums, but we're here to talk photography. I'll focus on that today, but I do a lot of different things, video work. I'm a painter, illustrator, graphic designer by trade, and found my way into photography through my graphic design career.
Okay.
I love all things ocean and landscape, as we've met up shooting the ocean together and the rock pools and by the sea. That's definitely a huge part of what I do with photography. And yeah, I can talk to you a little bit about that and how that came to be.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. I'm really interested in people. Why did they get started? Why do they keep doing it? Why do they do things the way they do it? So why don't we start with how you got started and what got you into landscape photography and ocean photography and droning and so forth?
Absolutely. Yeah. Aerial photography is a massive part of what I do and what I love. And I guess take it back to the start. I was working as a creative director for many years. I climbed my way up bit by bit to get to that level. It was huge on my list of goals to achieve. And
So this was with a advertising agency or a
media companies mostly.
Yep.
I did end up in an agency doing branded content, and that's where I moved up from art director to creative director.
Sure.
Big proud moment for me. Very happy with that. And once I got there, it was funny. I realized that it wasn't the all satisfying, fulfilling role that I'd envisioned.
Climbing the ladder has its costs. And
yeah, I ticked it off and then realized that it wasn't for me, interestingly. But like I said, it wasn't negative, it was all positive. But then I just found myself looking for other things in that position. And so I was doing videography on the side, actually, at the time. I'd been fortunate enough to be exposed to some real talent in the industry. And I found myself on shoots directing, really obsessed with the gear and really obsessed with how the guys who knew their stuff could get the results they were getting for me. I would just tell them what I wanted and they could shape a set to look like anything. And it was just really interesting to me. It wasn't so much the role that I was playing at the time that was enjoyable. It was more being exposed to the cameras and the guys who knew how to control them. Okay. And little did they know, I was taking notes every shoot and obsessing over the stuff that probably was mundane to them at the time, and taking notes, going home and playing with settings and getting on YouTube. And I just became a camera nerd at that point, in secret. My boss, I didn't want my boss to know that I was really pushing that side of things on my weekends. I was basically getting paid clients on the fly and just learning as I went, and keeping everyone happy, delivering good quality content through the skills that I'd picked up on the side. But I was very new when I started out on my own. Didn't assist. I didn't take on a junior position or anything like that. I just started a company and went for it, which was terrifying. But it really accelerated my learning. I made all the mistakes you could possibly make. And I guess that kind of gave me a baptism of fire and helped me get started very quickly.
Yeah, right. So what is it that keeps you going other than having to make money out of it? Obviously, if you started your own company, there's always that endless search for new clients and new work and repeat work from your existing clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for me, the passion of it is getting out into nature and being exposed to, especially the ocean. I grew up obsessed with surfing, and that was my pastime. As soon as I could get down the beach, I was there. Like, school was like waiting for the bell to ring so I could jump in the water and get some waves every day. And I was surfing when I was 5. My dad put me on a surfboard, and that's the greatest thing about my childhood that I remember. And so, yeah, for me, my art is very much being in that zone and being in that environment. And now it's like a battle between do I surf the waves or do I shoot the waves kind of thing. So
yeah. I've
it's
seen
interesting.
people combine the two.
Yeah, I do get out in the water. I've got a housing for my camera. You probably haven't seen much of my work in that department though, because I tend to surf more than I shoot. So my skill set isn't quite refined as much as what it should be.
Yeah. So in terms of your own personal work, let's leave the commercial stuff to one side for the moment. But in terms of your own personal work, do you approach that in a similar way to your commercial work? In other words, do you set yourself goals and projects, or are you more relaxed and more spontaneous with that sort of thing?
So it started out very spontaneous. It was more about just being there and being in the moment. And sometimes I don't even shoot. I'm now at a level with my aerial shooting that I know when I'm going to get something good and when I'm not going to. And so I don't launch the drone every single time that I'm there. Right. It's more of just getting up early, getting out and being there and enjoying those moments. And I think that's really important, because if you're just shooting randomly and there's no sort of love behind it and you're not getting that feeling coming through in the photography work, then it doesn't inspire. It doesn't, for me anyway, personally, I won't edit a shot unless I really get a feeling from it. And I think that communication comes through in the art a lot. When you put it out there, it's important to have had a connection to your own work in a way that other people will then, it'll transpire through to other people.
Yeah. No, I get exactly what you mean there. In terms of trying to communicate something, is there a message behind some of your work, or is it more just, okay, here's a really impactful scene and I'm happy just putting it out like that?
There is actually, and there's a bit of a story behind why I chose to do what I do and communicate my art now. It started out, like I said, just very casual and very relaxed and just being just a reason to get out there and be in the moment. But now, since joining Web3 particularly, and having exposure to so many people and connection to so many other photographers like yourself in the community, and then also just people who love photography and love appreciating photography. Yeah. The people that have reached out to me on my work have said things that really resonate with me and why I do it. And that is, it's a mental health message, really. I have a lot of issues with my own mental health and anxiety and depression and things like that. That's a constant battle, as I'm sure many of us do. And so being out there and seeing sunrise and seeing an incredible scene unfold before my eyes, it's better than any therapy session or any medication or anything else, I find. And usually I'll jump in the sea in those moments as well and get some water therapy. So for me, it started out as just a way to help myself, but then sharing my art with people, a lot of the stuff that's been collected, people say your stuff's just really tranquil and there's so much serenity that comes through in the work. It's quite peaceful and beautiful for their own mindset. And so I really took that and ran with it. I was like, wow, this is more about just me and what I do. This is like sharing this with other people and having a positive impact on the community and the world in general. So I've got really excited about that. And I thought, if I can contribute in any way to other people having a positive experience in life, then let's do it. And interestingly, when everything ramped up with the NFT space, it was just after COVID had come through. Is actually a much bigger story in that I don't know if we've got time for, but
we got plenty of time.
Okay, I can tell you a story about the COVID experience for myself and how this all has unfolded. Sure. Going back to my creative director role, as I said, things weren't really fulfilling me. And so I actually took the leap to go out on my own. I resigned from my role. Yep. And with my wife's support, she was like, just do it. I don't want to see you end up resenting being stuck in a corporate position and being miserable. She just said, why don't you do it? And my brother at the time had started his own aircon business. He's 10 years younger than me. And he just quit his job and did it. And I was like, what? There was a barrier for me where I couldn't even imagine doing it because I was so afraid of failure and not being able to support my family. And so with his example and his success, and then my wife's full-on support and just saying, go for it, I took that leap 2 weeks after I resigned, everything was in place. I had a few clients, I had all my gear, I'd invested in myself, I had everything set up I needed, a cinema camera, audio kit, multiple tripods, like stabilizers. I spent a lot of money on myself and I was ready to roll. 2 weeks after I resigned, I hadn't even left the position yet, but I'd given my notice and everything was in writing.
Mm-hmm.
Pandemic was announced.
Yep.
So that was one of the most terrifying moments in my life, because I thought, and clients left me left, right, and center at that point. They couldn't shoot. There was no shooting to be done. You couldn't be in a studio. So everything came crashing down very fast. And I had to jump onto government assistance at that point, as everyone else did.
Yep.
And my mental health suffered incredibly. It was like a knock-on domino effect over the next 9 months, where I was so determined, though, because I'd already set everything in motion, and I was like, I've got to just keep pushing. So I was on Facebook getting jobs doing Photoshop, cutting out images for websites. I was doing everything I possibly can to just bring in any money at all. It wasn't the shooting in studios and doing what I knew how to do, but it was just like, I've got to get through this. I didn't know how long it was going to last. It is a long story, so I'll cut it a bit shorter in that I had a pretty big breakdown a year later, as through all of the stress and through all of the pressure to succeed, I didn't want to let my family down. And we had our second, we had a baby during that year, had a little girl, and then got pregnant with another child, and then he was due about a year and a half, about 2 years later. So fast forward to 2019, I can't remember. But so before he was born is when I had this big episode. I think everything just came crashing down for me. And so getting out and shooting was really important for my own survival in that time. It was the only way I could escape all of the pressure and just the really negative stuff that was going on in my own mind, and be able to get some reprieve and get some distance from everything. And so, that's where my art became really important to me. And then telling that story at first was really difficult, because I still felt like I'd failed and I'd really made a bad move by leaving my position that was secure for my family. I put my family in a very tight spot, basically, but I got through it, and my art is part of that journey. I guess being able to tell that story now through my art is actually really therapeutic as well.
No, that's great. I guess coming out the other side of that anxiety and pressure that you'd put yourself under, what sort of techniques, other than getting out and about and shooting, what sort of techniques were you using to try and help yourself and get yourself through? Were you setting day by day goals or hour by hour goals, or just what sort of things were you doing?
So it was very difficult with the children. They zap so much of your energy and time that I probably wasn't looking after myself as well as I could be. I'm just trying to focus on giving them a really good experience and putting myself second, obviously, as most parents do. But some of the techniques I used, I did have a therapist once a week. So we're very lucky in Australia to have access to a program now, and they ramped it up during COVID because so many people were struggling, where Medicare, our public health system, will cover a certain amount of the cost of that program. I was very fortunate to be able to afford, even through the tight financial times, to have access to a professional. And she really helped me, got me through it big time, just with counselling and basically getting me out of my own headspace and realizing that I'm not just the only one going through this, and et cetera, and giving me some really powerful tools, breathing techniques, zooming out from feeling so zoomed in on everything and so tight and worried all the time, to be able to look out and actually look at my achievements and look at the positives and everything that, because I'm a fighter. Like, I was fighting really hard to get through and to get where I am. And I know you've seen me in the Web3 space. Like, that was not only really powerful for me, but that was another element on top of everything else I was doing that took a lot of energy to build from the ground up, as it has for everyone. I'm really proud of looking at the positives and looking at getting through and making it through, and having gone through a very tough time, but being strong enough to hold it together and for my family, and to make something of myself even though it was one of the toughest things I've ever been through. But yeah, I guess looking at the positives, relaxation, exercise is a big one.
Yeah, definitely.
I get out and mountain bike as often as I can. Getting in the surf is huge. That resets everything. After a surf, I feel like $1 million. That's a really powerful one, to get out in the ocean for me. And just appreciating my kids and family time, getting away from work. I'm such a workaholic, I've found that having kids has taught me to just shut down the computer and spend some time with them, and put everything else to the back and just jump on the trampoline or go for a little play in the garden and kick the ball around. And that's a huge one as well. That makes me really grateful.
Yeah, I totally agree. Nothing better than a bit of play when you're starting to feel that burn from sitting at the computer or editing or whatever it is that you've been doing for a long time and you've been putting a lot of work into. Out and just having that break with the kids is a great fillip, I think. In terms of, I'm not sure how much of this is used in that practice, but I'm going to redo that question. Sorry.
No worries at all.
Sounds like you were using some techniques like mindfulness and present moment awareness, I guess, to help with that introspection that was going on. How has that changed the way that you've approached your photography? Has that had an influence on the creativity of your photography as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think, like I said, just when I guess the best way has been that I've been getting out and doing it as often as I can. And that's what, with any art form or any medium, the more you do it, the better you get, the more you get to critique your own work and you get to refine what you do. And I'm always learning, but I think through that time and being able to get out as often as I could, I was just able to refine my techniques. And I'm at a level now where I feel very confident that I can shoot most things and get a good composition and come away with something. I know when the conditions are right. I know when I'm going to basically capture something special. And yeah, it's led to some spontaneity as well, in that, I don't know, it's funny that I get so bogged down in work and then all of a sudden I'm like, I've got to get out and shoot. And then I find that instinct is right, because when I do that, I get out and there's something magical that comes out of it, which is really nice.
Great. Do you see collaboration and community building as something important? You've talked a little bit about the community and Web3 and how that's helped you through some of your challenges. How has that community done that for you? How has that support network that you've built up in that arena assisted in, and how do you see it helping other people as well?
It's massive, Grant. It's honestly been the reason I'm still doing what I do. There were so many moments where I could have chucked in the towel, got a job in finance that paid 150K plus, and or gone back to my creative director role and been on a salary that was supporting my family. And I thought about it a lot. Like, I was on the verge of doing that before I found Web3. And then when I did, I had the likes of Laurie Grace, John Knopf, all these big guns basically saying you have value. No matter who you are, you have value as an artist, and art is valuable. And I was seeing people sell art for decent money and make a living. So that was huge for me. That was when it flipped the script for me, because I was in a very dark place. I was ready to quit art because I was so sick of being taken advantage of and being told that art has no value, that you have to sell your soul to make any money. You have to be a graphic designer or a web designer, or you have to do stuff that's very robotic, and you have to make people money for them to give you money, basically. And I was like, this is BS. I'm over this.
Or I want it for free and I'll give you in return some kind of
I'll credit your name.
Shared recognition,
which doesn't exist. Like, it's been proven that doesn't actually benefit anyone. Your exposure can just, where does that go? Makes
I can't pay the bills with exposure.
No, that makes them lots of money to have free content. You know, it's basically like slavery. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. Yeah, so the community has been absolutely massive for me in positive mindset, and feeling my own self-esteem has just gradually built up and up through exposure to people saying and collecting my work and appreciating what I do and saying, yeah, I want that, and I'll pay you for it. And that's huge. I've had a few print sales over my time grinding on Instagram, but it's over 5 years, I think I made $10,000. You put that into return on investment, it's not much. It's, in terms of hours, it's 50 cents an hour, if that, not even. Anyway, and then also, like you said, just connecting with other people and having a support network, and also being able to support others. Like, I've had so much help and assistance. I mentioned John Knopf before, that the first time I came into Web3 and made a sale, it was a WETH offer, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, is this a scam? I'd never heard of WETH before. And I was like, I had to find gas money to accept the offer, which I didn't have because my wallet was empty. And it was very new. And I was reaching out to everyone. I was like, what do I do here? I don't understand. And they're like, you've got to go to an exchange, you've got to buy ETH, and then you've got to wrap it, and then you've got to do all this stuff. And then so I got a DM from John Knopf instantly saying, I'll pay your gas to accept your offer. You've got to do that. And I'd already actually sorted it out, thankfully, before he did that. It was this whirlwind 10-hour thing that was going on for me to accept this sale. Sure. My first ever one. But just the fact that he DM'd me, total stranger, I knew of him because he was a big name in the space, but he didn't know who the hell I was.
Yeah.
He got wind of it and just said, I want to help you out. I'll pay your gas. And from that moment on, I realized that this whole space is just about helping each other. And from that point, I wanted to do the same. And so I've onboarded people. I've offered assistance where I can. I do little video promos for people for very little return. It's not about money. It's more about how can I use my skill set to then promote other people's work and get them seen in the space. And as we all do, we want to share others' work and retweet and push everyone's art out there as much as possible and get seen. And so it's really nice to be involved in that and to have people do the same for me and share my work and help me succeed. Yeah, it's like, I can't even put it into words just how incredible it's been in terms of the impact on my life.
Yeah, fantastic. One of the things that a lot of people struggle with is pricing their work. How do you go about it? Is there a formula you use, or you just make it up on the spot?
I've been in the space now with Web3 NFTs for a little while, so I kind of have a bit of a strategy now, whereas like it was really just like they say, fuck around and find out. Yeah. But like going back to prints as well, is I just looked at the market and what was out there in my genre. I was lucky enough to be onboarded to Riptide Prints, who they did all the pricing for me, and I just uploaded the work, and that was my first experience. They are on the very lower end of the scale. So I increase my prices on my website. I'm happy to be with them and have that work there, and whatever comes in through them is great because they do all the marketing and stuff, and that's fine. I stay loyal to anyone who's helped me out rather than jump off them and leave them behind. I left my stuff there, and then I bumped up my prices on my own website and my own, factoring in my marketing and everything like that. But going back to the NFT side of things, I've come in and I, as I said, heard very powerful messaging from people in the space, community leaders, and they were saying, this is long-term, don't undervalue yourself, kind of thing. And so I just basically looked at my work, looked at what I'd be happy with long-term from those pieces, how special they were to me. And I came in guns blazing, really. I listed my best work straight off the bat, and I listed it high at prices that, even though I was new to the scene, that I'd be happy with in 10 years. And I've stuck to that format. In saying that, along the way, those pieces have sat, a lot of them, like a couple sold, but the really high-end ones that are commanding a very unique collector who's willing to pay that price, still sitting there. And I'm okay with that. I don't have an issue with the fact that I haven't sold yet, because I'm just happy that I've been able to put them on the blockchain as part of my body of work that will sit there. And when they do sell, that'll be a very special moment to celebrate. Whereas if those pieces were just sitting on my hard drive, waiting and waiting this whole time for me to share them with the world in this space through this technology, that would be a bit of a, I think, that would be disappointing in itself for anything to happen to me and not have had that work minted. So yeah, my technique has been very much about get my best work out there, price it at a point that I'm going to be happy with regardless of time when it sells, and not look back and think, wow, I sold that so cheap, what was I doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, they do want to make sales quickly, and so they price their work very reasonably, which is fine. I have no problem with anyone doing that, but I just question for myself, if I was to go that route and price work cheap in order to gain volume and get collectors and then build up gradually, which is a good technique. It's worked for a lot of people. They've built a really good connection with the community through doing that and rewarding their early investors, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like I've had equal success in believing in myself, backing myself, and pricing my work accordingly.
Yeah, fair enough. I want to switch to where you are in terms of where you live and how that's influenced. You talked a lot about shooting in the ocean. Do you live close to the ocean? Is it a long way to go? Where do you go without giving away the secret spots?
I think you know all my spots, Grant. You probably know a few more than me. But yeah, the listeners, we don't want them flocking to the special
Yeah.
Very guarded about those locations. No. Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to live about 15 minutes from the ocean now. I grew up in Manly on the Northern Beaches, and very luckily, during that time in the 80s, it was an affordable place to live. And where we lived is now $3 million house that we were in, where we were renting out these beautiful places as a family growing up right near this beautiful ocean village. It was a tiny little village back then. It's now basically a miniature Bondi. So yeah, I was fortunate to grow up there and be exposed to that culture as a kid, and I've taken it for granted a lot. I moved away out west for a time, and I stopped surfing, and I got into a whole other culture with sort of street life and skateboarding and things like that. And doing that, I realized how much I missed it. I started to almost feel a little bit unhealthy, and getting back to it was really special for me. It made me realize just how lucky I'd been to have that in my life. In saying that, we had kids, and we moved all around Sydney, Northern Beaches. I had to stay close to the ocean. I knew that. My partner was very supportive of that.
Yep.
But she's always longed for the country life a little bit. She grew up rural, hinterland of Noosa. And yeah, she still has that connection like me to the sea, not too far away from the ocean and the coast, but a bit more country style, the bigger properties and farm life and all that sort of thing. So she's always expressed that desire to me to have a little cottage out on a property somewhere. And I was like, how are we going to make this work? I can't be away from the sea. And yet she wants to have this connection in her life, and partnership's all about compromise and making sure each party is happy. And so we had kids, and our tiny apartment on the Northern Beaches became unlivable. And so we just took a leap of faith, and we moved down to Mount Kembla, which is about an hour and a half out of the city, out of the area, probably. You probably know, like Kiama Way, Port Kembla. That's all close by to me now. And it's funny because I used to drive hours and hours to get down to Jervis Bay to shoot, 3 or 4 hours, and then Wollongong was always on my hit list for surfing. There's a lot of great places down here that are really good waves that are not crowded. Probably shouldn't say too much, but I'm very fortunate to be down here now because I'm in between. I can get to Sydney for work if I need in a day, no problems. It's not a hard commute, and I can get to Jervis Bay to shoot Hyams Beach for sunrise very easily without the 2 a.m. wake-up call that I used to have to do. I feel like I've found my place. I'm in a very good place now with where we live. We sold our apartment and we traded it in for a family home at the same price as the cost of Sydney. Cost of living down here is so much more manageable. And it's really helping me with like I said before, with all those pressures and stresses and mental health problems that arose being up in Sydney. I think with the traffic and the stresses of affordability, being down here now is a key part of rebuilding all of that for me and getting back to a feeling of peace.
Yeah,
And
it's a much more relaxed lifestyle. I know other friends of ours have moved down a little bit further than you. They're down near Shell Harbour, and
yep.
they're loving it. We go down and spend the weekend with them occasionally because it's nice for a break from, as you say, all the traffic and pain in
Yeah.
the backside that Sydney can be.
Yeah, it's incredible how laid back it is. We were quite
Yeah.
worried that it was going to be too much of a change and that we were going to miss out on city life and we're going to be bored or not have access to the things that we're used to.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm back in Manly 10 years ago, or
Yeah,
when I
right.
was 10 years old. It's a real village mentality down here. People are very friendly and just way more chilled out. No one rushes. It can be frustrating because you take your car in for a service and they don't call you that day. You're used to Sydney where everything's like, get in, get out. You get a call 3 hours later.
Yeah.
This is the problem. Like you might get a call 2 days later after chopping your car in. And you're like, where's my car? And they're just like, oh, whatever.
We'll sort it out.
And I'm getting into that mindset and that mentality more and more. And I'm quite happy that my kids will be as well.
Yeah, yeah. I always ask people what their most memorable experience is. What's yours?
Wow, that's a big one. My most memorable experience. I think that comes photography. Okay, photography, yes. Seeing with the drone whales for the first time. That was just mind blowing. Like I was trembling and shaking from the awe of that experience, and it's one that will stay with me forever.
Yeah, fantastic.
I've minted the piece, A Mother's Love, which is that experience. It's a wild story, actually, if you want to hear it.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was on a motorbike at the time. That was my transport. And it was great because I could get the drone. I had my little drone bag that would strap across the chest, compact Mavic 1 Pro. And I would just zoom around the beaches, getting shots every morning before work. It was like my daily thing. Or when I was coming home, if it was daylight savings, I could stop in for a sunset at the beaches. But anyway, one morning I was headed to a location to shoot. And then I just got this thing in my head of I was going north to Avalon and I was pulled up at Monavale Lights on the motorbike. And I got this thing of, nah, go to Warriewood today. We haven't done Warriewood Blowhole. Let's go and check it out.
Yep.
And so I went down to the beach, I pulled up, and just as I pulled in with the bike, the sun was still coming up. It was below the horizon, but there was just enough light to see the scene. And there was this like giant, just like sea monster in the shoreline.
Yeah, wow.
Like in from the breakers. It was a whale, it was a mother whale, southern right. But it was huge. It looks like this giant monster. And my brain couldn't really take in what I was seeing. I was scared at first because I thought it couldn't be real. I was seeing a horror movie of this giant monster.
Cool.
Sounds really weird because it was this beautiful whale. And so I'm shaking and I'm like getting the drone ready. I'm like, I've got to get this, whatever this is alien thing. And trembling, taking it apart. I'm trying to stay calm because flying a drone is not something you want to do in a panic state. And so eventually get it launched and I'm trying to stay calm because I don't want this thing to take off and miss it as well. And then anyway, I get up there and it was just cruising back and forth in the shallows. It was a southern right with a calf. And so she'd come in for a rest to give her baby a rest, obviously, into the Bay of Warriewood, which is quite a nice, beautiful, calm beach. And they were just swimming under these surfers back and forth for a good 45 minutes. And I was just getting all these clips and video of them and just in awe of this moment. And then as I was shooting, I was going to have to change my battery soon. I just hear this voice, land that drone now. And I'm like, what the hell? I look over and there's this guy full ball running at me, like sprinting like the Terminator. And so I'm like, what's going on here? And I'm flying a drone, but then I'm like, this guy's going to attack me. So I'm in this kind of this weird moment of I can't put down the controller and defend myself. So I had to like talk this guy down, and he got really close to me and he said, you got to learn that drone. You can't fly above whales. And I had no idea about CASA or the rules or any of that stuff. I just bought a drone and started flying it. This was very early days. And so he turned out to be National Parks and Wildlife and very aggressive, really upset with me. And so I had to use my people skills in that moment rather than my fighting skills. And just talk to him and say, oh yeah, look, sorry, no, I'm very new to droning. I didn't know. Absolutely, I'll land right now. Just give me some space, kind of thing. And he calmed down because I was calm with him.
Yeah.
Gradually he simmered down. And then eventually it got to a point where he was like, what whale is it anyway? Can I have a look? And so from then I said, oh, yeah, absolutely, of course. Gave him the full respect rather than attack back and be defensive. It was like this moment where I could really turn the situation around. And we actually ended up having a chat and becoming quite, not mates, but becoming quite connected in a way. And I gave him a look at the controller and he was like, Southern Rights, oh my goodness, wow, they shouldn't be here at this time. And he started rattling off all his knowledge about whales. And meanwhile, I'm snapping photos and recording the whole time. And then he said, yeah, look, he gave me a bit of a rundown on the rules and regulations. And then he wanted me to send him all the footage. And I said, oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, no worries. I thought, there's no way in hell I'm incriminating myself and sending him all my footage. So we parted ways, and that was the end of that. But I had this insane experience where that will definitely stay with me.
Fantastic.
Forever.
What about horror stories? Have you got any of those?
Oh, yeah. With the drone, you betcha. I've had a few, because I fly out over the ocean several kilometers to find still life. I've had a few really hairy moments. One being that I was flying several kilometers out and then a storm front blew in out of nowhere. I hadn't really monitored the weather reports that day as well because it was quite calm.
Yeah.
This front blew in from the south and it took my drone out to sea even further. And then even on sport mode, I was flying towards to come back to land and it was still going backwards. That's how powerful this wind gust was, which was really nerve-wracking because that was zapping my battery like you wouldn't believe. I should have lost my drone that day, but basically what I did was fly north to get out of the storm and then have to come back inland. At that point, I was so far away that I lost connection with the controller. I couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
So I knew where I was just through looking at where I was on the map before losing connection. And so it was still flying, thankfully. It didn't just drop out of the sky, but I had to pilot it back to land. And then in my head, I was thinking, okay, as long as I'm over land and I run out of battery, I'll be able to find it with the GPS later. I knew that I'd heard stories about people locating their drone through the app once they recharge the controller with the last known location kind of thing. So I wasn't completely panicked, but it was very scary. And then weirdly though, I was able to pilot it back. It was dropping in and out of connection. And then I was seeing where it was. And I got it back to where I was. And all I could hear was this like mosquito sound in the distance. And I was like, I know where it's coming. It's coming. It's somewhere here. And so I got the drone back, thankfully. But that was terrifying. I thought it's going out to sea, never to be seen again. And basically, I've had a few like that where it's just a similar thing of being out over the ocean, battery draining, and then thinking I'm never going to get it back and just miraculously somehow making it back to land on time and saying, I'll never do that again. I'll never do that again. And then, of course, next shoot, I'm out 4Ks out and chasing whales.
I guess talking about it, how do you balance the desire to capture a stunning image with the need to respect and minimize your impact on the natural environment?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think for me personally, I think that documenting them is really important. I do tend to push the barriers a little bit. And I know other people are a lot more reserved in how they approach things, but I do respect the animals that I'm documenting 100% and would never get so close that it's going to do any damage or trauma. Try not to fly directly above, because if something was to fall out of the sky, and while a lot of my shots do look like they're directly above, it's like more of an angle, and I just crop in really heavily in post. So I haven't come across any problems with that, but I do get the odd person commenting, and I just let them know my process and educate them on, I love nature, I love animals, I love wildlife. I've never really do anything to harm them where possible. I think there is a lot of people out there that do silly things and
definitely
give drone photography a very bad name. And I would hate to ever be one of those people and push the space backwards, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's always struck me as and it might be because of the way humans view the two different animals, but nobody seems to have a problem with getting close to the water when doing drone shots of sharks, for example.
Mm.
But they certainly do for whales. And I get whales have got to come up to the surface and breathe.
Yeah. And I think that,
Yeah, I'm just not sure why there's such a difference.
for me, it makes a little bit of sense given their endangered status and that they are a little bit more sensitive in their breeding and things like that. I think sharks are a bit more robust. They're very much a machine that can survive a lot of overfishing, and there still are some endangered species of sharks, but given the chance, they bounce back pretty quickly as soon as things are regulated. I've seen numbers of great whites flourishing in California once they stopped culling and things like that. From a marine biology point of view, I guess that there's a kind of a message around whales being a little bit more sensitive. They only have 1 to 2 calves, and so each year the numbers are increasing now, which is really positive, but it's very slow going for them. So they're not listed as endangered, but they're still being protected pretty staunchly and looked after by certain parties, which I can absolutely respect.
Yeah. In terms of the obviously doing marine animals and that sort of thing, it's a bit of you got a bit of an idea about where and when they're going to be, but it's always a bit of chance that you're actually going to see anything. With your other photography, like the wave photography, etc., how much are you using things like creative visualization prior to going out? Are you thinking about what it is that you're trying to capture before you go? Or is it more spontaneous and you just go, okay, the conditions look good, I'll just go today, and off we go and catch what we catch?
Yeah, so these days, given everything I spoke about with Web3 and the confidence it's given me in my art and people believing in what I do, it's helped me to take what I do more seriously. It was very much I'm going for a surf, and then if I capture anything, bonus kind of mentality in the beginning. And it started out as a bit of fun that way. And now that it's art for me, and I'm taking it very seriously this year. I'm approaching galleries, pushing my print sales online. I've even started posting very much professionally on LinkedIn as a photographer. And so for me now, it is very much calculated in that let's map out what works and what doesn't, what settings I'm using that I find successful. I'll document, keeping track of things more and planning, like you said. Yeah, as a creative director, I realized that I'm very good at increasing exposure and sales for companies and brands. And I've never done that for myself. I've been terrible at that for myself. So a
lot of people struggle to make that flip, I think.
Yeah, it was just more of a humility thing, and oh, no one's going to really believe in me, and having this negative mindset in the background all the time. That's perfect Italiano. Of course, people want to buy their product, but I'm just little old me. Like, what have I got to sell, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm like, no, I'm going to utilize that skill set over the past 20 years that I've had in my career, and I'm going to put it into place for myself. So planning, storyboarding, all those skills that I've used to do professional shoots are definitely part of my personal work now.
Yeah, okay. Do you prefer to shoot alone, or do you prefer to shoot with other people?
I definitely prefer to shoot alone. However, I've loved meeting up with yourself and going for a shoot. Timbo Slice is an absolute legend. Ty Bowman, I've met Chris, the balded photographer. There's so many names I can rattle off of people in the space that I've had the chance to meet up with. And combining that with the joy of photography at the same time is really special. So I prefer to be on my own in my own art form, but it's also fantastic to have those experiences with others.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I'm a bit the same. I'm very much the introvert and very much about just going out and doing what I want to do. But there are times when, a bit of company's nice, and go and catch up and have a coffee or a bacon and egg roll afterwards and enjoy the morning.
Yeah, it's great.
The time and effort that you're spending in that planning, what does that planning process look like in terms of hours, days, weeks?
So it's a work in progress at the moment. It's really like minimum at the moment because I have so much client work to get through. I actually have some Web3 projects that I've taken on, which are massive, and that's taking up a lot of my time at the moment. But I think as time develops, as things go forward this year, that the time I put into that will just grow and grow. My wife has expressed I want to get involved and utilize her communication skills. She's got a BA in comms and she's a teacher.
Yep.
She critiques my descriptions on art and my titles, and she's very much the wordsmith. Yeah, I think her and I will develop a bit of a partnership as the kids get a little bit more independent. It's very much a long-term thing in my mind now. I talk about this year, but I think really it's the next 5 years where I will see the most growth in my own art sales and exhibitions. And we're planning on doing a market stall in Wollongong, for instance. I've got a storyboard, I've got a vision board that I have, and I just pin things up that will come to mind. I'll note down. I have a lot of like epiphanies at 2 a.m., which is really annoying. I wake up with a eureka moment and I'll fumble around for a pen and write it down or whatever if I can. So it's on the fly at the moment. It's like I do what I can, but yeah, I think it's better than never starting and just saying, oh, tomorrow I'm going to start, which I've done for 20 years now.
Yeah. In terms of your processing, the post-processing workflows, are you spending a lot of time on honing an image, or are you more laissez-faire and as I saw it, that's how it looks?
Yeah, I do a lot of post in my work generally, but it's a real mixture. So some days I'll get a shot that I'm so happy with, particularly the aerial top downs of an abstract texture or like a split screen of the ocean and the land. And I might just give it a little bit of dehaze and some vibrancy, and then that's it, job done. It looks amazing. And then other days I'll actually do composite work where I'll shoot a drone shot and a shot from my stills camera on a tripod, and I'll combine those two together. So recently I minted a piece called The Whale's Mouth, part of my Storm Surfer series. And that's a composite of the sky I shot with my stills camera and the drone shot out over the ocean of the surfer standing like really tall up in this perfect barrel going over him. And the reason for that was that this insane storm blew over, but I couldn't capture it the way I wanted to with just the drone. When you're shooting, unfortunately, the drone doesn't shoot portrait anymore, the Mavic 3.
Yeah.
So I shot landscape and it couldn't get the sky in. And I found that I was able to capture a way more dramatic shot of the storm using my stills camera anyway. And so that's a technique that I've been using a little bit in my photography, where I'll use two shots from different cameras and combine them, because you can get really creative with like a telephoto shot of the sky and get really high detail of the cloud, things like that. And then you can get this wide angle ocean vista as well and it messes with your mind a little bit in the final shot. And I quite often get people going, is this a single shot? Like it looks so unreal. Like, how did you do the? And that for me is a great feeling of they don't even know if it's a composite. And to me, it's quite obvious, but like that feels good to have my art questioned and people look at it and go, wow. Because I like that. I like that with AI as well. It's not photography, but people are getting really creative now with creating these unreal landscapes that don't exist, but like you look at it and it tricks your mind a little bit. I quite like that to play with that a little bit with photography. I know it's not for everyone, and that's okay. I don't mind if people don't appreciate that side of my art. That's okay. I totally get photography is a beautiful art form in itself. And I really admire the guys like yourself who take a scene and they just do a little bit of post, but they have a really good eye for capturing a scene in its entirety with one shot.
I do a lot of post.
Do you? Oh, there you go.
I'm normally doing, because of the high dynamic range at sunrises, I'm usually doing a lot of exposure blending. So there's luminosity masks and all those sorts of things involved in it. But then once I get that, there's quite a bit of dodging, burning, contrast tweaking, toning down the color, changes that those contrast tweaks create to a point where it's still vibrant, but it's not unrealistic. And it might sound weird, but I'm trying to get a shot that looks as close to what I saw. Occasionally,
Yes.
I'll go a bit out there and do something that's definitely not what I saw, but
Yeah. But it's fun, right? It's part of the
yeah,
process.
that's it. The process in itself, I can spend anything up to hour, 2 hours on a single image, the single finished image. But that sometimes can take 10 or 12 other images, particularly if I'm doing a large pano where I've used exposure blends across, say, 12 shots, that 12 individual frames, but exposure blend there with 5 individual exposures. Could be 80 or 90 shots in 80 or 90 exposures in a single image that ends up being.
The result you get with that is fantastic, and you can print them like
the detail that you've got is absolutely phenomenal, and that's why I love it.
Yeah, exactly. I think every one of us has a different approach to that, and as long as you're having fun and loving it, and you're really proud of that final image, it comes through. It resonates with other people.
Absolutely. I guess talking about things like AI, and that may not be a challenge in your eyes, but what do you see as being some of the biggest challenges as photography is evolving and digital art is evolving?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've had that moment. I was very lucky early on to see the digital revolution as a positive and to really run with it. I did my diploma of design back in 2004, and that was when multimedia was just entering the syllabus for design. And so I took that as a core subject, and I was exposed to making touchscreens, animations, video. It was very early on. I bought a really crappy handy cam and had to play with it just for the college. And so I guess I always had exposure to that, luckily, whereas there was a lot of people in my field who were caught in the fear mentality of what is this, like, oh my gosh, and they froze and they just buried their head in the ground and decided to stick with print medium till they died. And then unfortunately they lost their jobs, and it was 200 people in the company I was on just wiped out in a week, gone, because they weren't able to upskill and evolve with what the company needed, which was digital. And so that was, for me, a really positive experience in that I was able to adapt. And so now my mindset is very much, as these things come along, and they're really, things move fast in this space now. It's crazy. It's overwhelming for an old bloke like me, getting older. It can be overwhelming, but I think as long as you're just okay to give it a go and jump in and have that sort of growth mindset where you're like, it's hard to keep having to upskill and learn new things. It's not a natural feeling. You want to be cozy and comfy and just stay in your zone. But as long as you're open to it, like with AI particularly, I jumped into Mid-Journey and started having a play and to get an understanding of how it works. And I think as long as you do that with the technologies that come along, it's a way to stay relevant and to ensure that you've got the tools there at your to access to be able to create new opportunities for you, rather than to be in the crowd that refuse to grow and get left behind, sort of thing. So I think for me, the challenge is the time it takes to learn. Like, I've been saying I'm going to learn 3D animation for 5 years now. Like, I've done all this basic cinema tutorials on Cinema 4D. I understand how it works. I've got Blender on my machine, the free one. I have zero extra time to take on another thing at the moment. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, fair enough. How do you see the future of landscape photography evolving? And I guess what trends or innovations do you see shaping the field in the next few years?
That's a really interesting question. I guess the gear is always going to shape where things move to. The cameras have come such a long way now. It's insane what can be done in camera. And you were talking about things like focus stacking and exposure stacking and all these sorts of things. Like, the cameras now can do so much. So I guess the way I see things evolving is more and more people joining the space. It used to be very limited to certain pro photographers that would go out and do these big adventures and have backing from big companies, and whereas now anyone can go. And so I guess I see it growing more with the accessibility.
Yep.
But in saying that, I think that there's a real purity to the art of landscape photography in that you have to really love it. You have to be willing to nearly get swept off some rocks or do a 5-day hike or these kind of wild things we all do that love it. It's not for everyone. So there's almost an element of it that will always stay the same. And you have to be passionate. That's passion. You have to be passionate about it and really love it to get some of the results that the community are able to get.
Absolutely. If you weren't a photographer, what would you be?
I'd probably still be a creative director, directing photographers. I'd be telling you guys what to do. No, I don't know. To be honest, I could have ended up in banking or something crazy because I was at that, like I said, that crossroads where money became a real consideration. And yeah, I could have been, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. At the moment, I'm a photographer and I'm loving it. And so that's all that matters.
That's great. Who else should I be talking to on the podcast?
Oh, I guess my other brother in the space is Timbo Slice. I don't know if you've had him on. I
haven't had him on yet. He's in my sights though.
Yeah, he's a legend to talk to. Really interesting dude and just humble and down to earth dude. I've been lucky enough to meet up with him for shoots, and I would say I consider him a really good friend. He's helped me out a lot. He's actually my biggest collector, which blows my mind. Yeah, he's like a whale. He's had so much success that he's out there supporting artists like me just as much as people are supporting him. And he's always looking out to help people that are getting started. Like he's always picking up work from guys that haven't had sales yet and things like that, which is just testament to what a dude he is. And his success is pretty incredible. Like his story will be, I think, an interesting one for you to hear.
Yeah, fantastic.
He's just had astronomical rise to fame from hard work and determination.
Thanks for that. I've got one more question for you, and it's the one that everyone wants to know the answer to. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
No, I don't. I don't think it should be allowed.
No.
I used to have it as a kid. I remember as a teenager, as a skateboarder, I used to go to Pizza Hut after we do a regular thing. My mate's older sister was the manager at Pizza Hut in Manly.
Oh yeah.
And so she'd hook us up with all you can eat buffet. I think we'd all chuck in and she'd charge us for one, and 8 of us would get to have all you can eat. And so pineapple, the Hawaiian was a regular, obviously, and up there with barbecue meat lovers. But no, these days I'm actually a bit of a pizza nerd. I've got a little oven at home and I like to make my own. Yeah. In saying that,
I got to agree, homemade's best.
Yeah, homemade all the way. But I have to say, I had a guest come over for dinner and they said, you better serve me Hawaiian. And so I got a bit fancy and did a little bit of a rosemary and thyme caramelized pineapple with a smoked ham.
Wow.
And that was my compromise. So that you have gourmet Hawaiian. I'm not giving you canned pineapple.
Fantastic. Oh, well, thank you very much for spending some time with us, Dave. I've really enjoyed getting to know your story a little bit more. Where can people find your work?
Yes, my website, newlightvisual.com. And I've got my film work there, I've got my design work there and my photography. But most of all, I'm really pushing the NFT side of things. So there's a link there to all my NFTs.
Yep.
I'm on a lot of different marketplaces I won't list now. But yeah, and if you wanted to connect, Twitter at New Light Visuals is probably the best place to do.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Dave. Thanks,
Grant. Appreciate it, mate.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because... Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at grantswinburnphotography.com. I'm also on Vero, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.